So it was going to be me and Dylan, but Dylan ended up running home sick, so I'm going to be actually doing the presentation today. We're going to be going over the Application Studio, the lovely gotchas and the potholes. And being from Chicago, we always have potholes. We just came out of our winter season, which means every road has a crater in it, and it's going to break the wheel on your car. Unfortunately, Pete, no, Dylan didn't make the slide here. I ended up having to make it, but I just put us down. Anderson came before Dekker alphabetically, so I just followed the alphabet here. So I broke the presentation for this morning into kind of a 3-area prongs. So we're going to kind of follow the trident fork world here. It's the requests that have been submitted through the Epicor ideas portal for the known issues that are out through App Studio right now. And I wanted to bring this kind of to attention to people so that people would know Epicor ideas is out there. We need more people adding their thoughts and gaining weight on some of these issues. In order to get the software fixed, the more people that vote on a topic or say, hey, this is important to my company, Epicor takes that into account and escalates the item up the list. So I did the first section of this morning's presentation is going to be going over the fixes that are out there. Now, I don't have all of them. Some of the items that had literally 0 votes, or I couldn't understand what the user was writing for the question, those I didn't necessarily put in. But I will request that people go out to the ideas portal and find out, hey, which ones apply to me? Yes, Andres, this is definitely a known problem. You only get 50 votes. So yes, you kind of have to use them wisely. And items that you say, hey, this would be nice to have versus this is a must-have for me. So you do kind of have to balance. And I'm going to say, I think someone put a complaint into ideas that you want to have more than 50 votes. Because some areas of the software that are heavily broken require more votes than 50. Then I turned around and I broke the second part of the presentation today into Application Studio potholes. And I talked to a handful of people that are heavy developers within Application Studio and ask them, hey, what are your pitfalls? Where are the problems that you're running to in the software that are not documented, but we want to make sure that everybody knows what these are. And the use of Epicor functions is the third part. And we have kind of the top 12 tips for doing your conversions for C# code over to functions and tips of how does the interface work and what are some of the limitations so that you know what you can get away with when converting. When you're in App Studio, there is no more coding. Well, I'm not going to say there's no more coding. There is 5% coding still available, but it's a goofy hack that you have to work around to be able to do it. And that was actually submitted by Hannah over at Stephen Gold. She sent in an idea of, hey, how do I turn around and get this to work? And how do I force my JavaScript to kick off? And she found a way to work around the system and make it work for her. But as far as a IDE or a development or a JavaScripting, that doesn't exist. Correct. Steve Keller has a comment here. The big problem is that tech support wants you to use the ideas to get bugs fixed. Ideas should also be for enhancements. Unfortunately, there's only one mechanism for us to put the requests in. So if it is a support issue that the escalator do create as a bug, I would definitely say pop that into ideas, but we need to be able to find a way to share these a little better so that people know when there's a item out there. So moving into the first section here, some of the known issues that people have put with Application Studio. And I'll kind of make sure that the video is moving here. So the first one that I found was from Brenda Higgins. on February 23rd this year. I have links, so we'll go ahead and put this out, the presentation. I'll go ahead and email with the minutes of the meeting, and the links are in here. So if it is an issue for you, you can write down the KMTC or the ERP number. I put those in here, but I also have the hyperlinks that go straight to it on the ideas page if you want to process these after the meeting. First one is the layer change list and log. They're looking to have a list of changes that was done with each application studio layer that was built. So when you're changing or updating, you want to know what was done on the layer prior. And one of the problems right now is when you go into like the properties or the description and change it after you create it, it doesn't always save. I normally say put it in the description field, all of your notes, but then when you go to change or modify the layer again, you would have to create a new layer, copy that one to a new, and then put the new description in, because it doesn't let you overwrite the description. Well, it allows you to overwrite, it just won't let you save it. So if this is a request for your company, definitely add on to that thread. Another one, there was an unmentioned person that submitted it, but they had put a request in the ability to embed Epicor dashboards into Kinetic interfaces. Kind of like in the classic view, where you could add a tab and embed a dashboard and then publish and subscribe. People are requesting that ability inside the Kinetic layer, where I can turn around and build a dashboard, turn around and throw that in, and then publish and subscribe to it. There is a kind of hokey workaround where you could embed a grid, link the grid to the BAQ, and then filter the BAQ using a little bit of where clause magic and JSON to turn around and filter what data is coming into that grid. But as far as the dashboard with the tracker views and everything else, that's not really going to be there. Using something like Jose had mentioned earlier, the Zing charts, maybe we can turn around and add those onto the Kinetic layer and link that to the data as well. That is possible. Currently for this one, there are only 14 people that say this is an issue. I'm going to say more people when they get into Kinetic and finding they can't add these dashboards easily into Kinetic, they're going to be jumping onto this bandwagon. Next one is automating a BAQ parameter in Application Studio with a widget, and this came from Mukesh Desai. This is also from this year, March 29th. Instead of typing in the slider panel that pops out, when runtime happens, he's looking to have this BAQ parameter right in with the widget when you add the BAQ. Currently, there's only one vote supporting Mukesh on this, and I'm going to say more people are going to want this where they can pass that data without having to do programmatic magic. Dean Miller last year had submitted one, standalone Kinetic personalization, maintenance, and purging. So if I have 10 users that have all put personalizations out on Kinetic, as the administrator, I want to be able to purge these or clean those out like we do in the classic version right now. But there's no easy way to do that. There is no cleanup tool for people. If this applies to you guys, go ahead and vote for this one. Hey, Andres, I found one of yours out there. And that's the ability to export and import Kinetic layers and personalizations in the App Studio. Now, you kind of can do this, Andres, but you would have to do it as a solution. So in the Solution Manager, there is a Kinetic app or a Kinetic layer that was an option added to the Solutions Manager. So you can turn around and still get some of this out. It's just not doing it directly from inside App Studio. So that may be a way for you to get that information out. And it looks like a handful of other people joined onto your bandwagon for doing this, but I would say go ahead and right now use the Solutions Manager to export your Kinetic layers. Hey, Hannah's out here also, and she wanted additional triggers and hooks in App Studio. This is from last year and still is now fixed into 12. They wanted additional hooks like mouse over, on hover, key pressed. I'm going to say this is very crucial because a lot of people also wrote their own drag and drop file system attachment. So not all of those tools that were available on the customization toolbox are available inside App Studio. And it looks like Hannah has a whole lot of people on her bandwagon with 35 votes for this to be added, but I did not see that in the 22.1, which should be being released at Insights here at the end of the month. The next one is also from Hannah, and that was App Studio splitting to rows. She wanted the ability to have a widget that allows to take a string and split it into rows within the data view. It adds a single row right now, but not multiples. And she's looking for the ability to add multiple rows into that. I would almost say it could possibly do that, I'm going to say, with a Zing chart, but that's not necessarily going to be the same thing that she's looking for. I don't even know if Hannah made it to the meeting today. Nope, not seeing her on the list here. But if this is something that you're looking for, an ability to split into rows for your application studio, go ahead and add on with Hannah's topic here. Okay, and Francois Valley Bernard is requesting this year the blank form, kind of like we had the UDO1 form, the UDO2 form, and then you could turn around and add your fields to this. I did not have a chance to test this. If it's working where you can add a Kinetic app to a UD form. So if anybody knows this, I didn't have time to test it this morning or last night, but this might be an option. But kind of like in the classic interface, you added the menu item, then you would log back into Epicor, go to that new menu item and enter it in customization mode. You could do whatever you wanted to your UD form. I'm going to say that may be possible with the Kinetic, but then you would have to go to App Studio and turn around and add the layers to it. If that's not there, this could be part of where Epicor is requesting people go buy the SDK for the software. Then you can turn around and build your own Kinetic forms, make whatever you want, pretty much sky's the limit, because you would have the SDK for the software. I'm going to say most people use those UD forms, but only 7 people have voted on this topic. So, sorry, I'm going to turn around and request, if this is an issue for you or you're using those UD forms, go ahead and add yourself to this list so that those become available. If I have a moment to test this out here before we send the minutes out, I'll get a notice as well and add that to the minutes. Patrick Clark, February this year, was a print preview should pop up a new browser tab. This is a gray area. Some people allow browsers to turn around, have pop-ups blocked. Others allow it to do it. So this is also going to be based on your security setting. But he was saying customers are used to a pop-up PDF on the screen. Now the PDF's located in the bell icon, so customers have to search or know how to get to that to the preview. Okay, and on our last topic, Caleb has a comment here that in Classic, he used an empty BAQ with an empty dashboard assembly, and not sure if that would translate as well over to Kinetic. Inside Kinetic, when you go into the App Studio, there is an area where you can view all of the different forms and things that are available for you to add a personalization to. I did not see any of the UD or user forms that were in from Classic available in there. But I'm wondering if they have to be added to the menu before they pull or show up on the Application Studios list. So definitely, Caleb, I would say let's go ahead and test some of these and start expanding our knowledge of what's fully available in App Studio. Last year, Hannah had another suggestion, adding an alternate text or a tooltip caption to the property for the controls. And while it did not say that it was fixed, it was really weird because I'm doing the presentation right after this on what's new in 22, and this is one of the new features that are supposed to be available. But I hadn't seen if it was in there yet. So I'm thinking this was slated for a fix coming out here this month, but it didn't have any update on the ideas portal that said, hey, this has been escalated to a fix, it's slated for this release. But it is highlighted as one of the fixes for 22.1. Again, any questions or comments regarding these, by all means, go ahead and just throw them into the question window. I'll try and keep an eye on both screens here. I love this one that Tim Shoemaker also turned around and put an idea suggestion in for Epicor, and that was the ability to edit data in the launch page of Kinetic. In the classic screen, nearly every program had both a detail page and a list view. If you searched and selected multiple records, the records appeared in the list view and were editable. This allowed for quick editing of the data that doesn't really exist in the new experience with Kinetic. It's you get the forms that are there and the layout a little bit limiting, but this is what you have. I think 4 columns is now the new maximum instead of just 2. But that's strictly for users. If you were one of the people that edited in the list view, like adding a sales order, a lot of people I know will turn around and type in the list view. They'll move the columns that they wanted just so that they have a quick way of doing data entry. Rather than having to go page by page from the details, they would just enter it in the list view. If this is something that applies to your company, go ahead and join this suggestion from Tim Shoemaker. Dean Miller wanted padding on Kinetic forms. There's a lot of unused space in Kinetic screens, and this is true when you don't have control to really get to the CSS or layer that says how much padding there is, but he is correct. There's an awful lot of wasted space, I think, in the screen, while other people say, oh, it looks pretty, it looks more user-friendly. It also prompts for a whole lot more scrolling to get to all the fields. And it may be an easier way for people to move around and see more data in a more compact area. If you try to use the adaptive in App Studio for like a cell phone versus a tablet versus a PC, it's a whole lot of scrolling that your users are having to do to see all the fields. The spacing between the fields is also spacing that you can't turn around and control and say, instead of having a 4 or 6 pixel pad, hey, can I bring that down to 1, make things a little tighter and easier to see? There is no option for doing that. Hey, Jose, you've got one also on here, and that was allowing a default quick search to replace the landing grid on the screens like it does in Classic. When you make a quick search, you can choose to have the default search system for like part or part number. That doesn't exist in the Kinetic experience. And it definitely would be helpful. I'm sure people are using this also. I would almost say you might want to look at possibly the context menu launching, where you can turn around and pass that, but not necessarily be a quick search, but be more like a zone or a, what was the term they called the search? It wasn't a quick search. It was like a safe search where you could type in the field and do, predictive searches. Thank you. Just word kind of escaped me there. The predictive searches are there so that you can kind of turn around and start typing and it'll turn around and show what's available, kind of like the Google search customization that a lot of people added to the Classic interface. This predictive search is one of the new features in 22.1 coming out towards the end of the month here. Franny Eves turned around and put in a request to re-implement all the functionality for list tabs and search functions. Kind of similar to what we had back in the Classic, but it's really missing here in the Kinetic, and having to always, even just pressing enter to execute, enter is not the default on most of the tabs now. So when you're moving around App Studio, just starting typing, when you hit enter, it's not the search button that or the OK button that kicks off. You need to go click on the button for it to activate. This was submitted a long time ago. I'm going to say over, well, June of 21, and only has 5 votes. But I'm going to say a lot of people are looking to cut down the number of clicks to get to data inside App Studio or inside the Kinetic interface. And it seems like in some areas they increase the number of clicks at Epicor rather than decrease. This one's a little older, from Steve Keller. In version 11, allow a date range prompts inside dashboards. Dashboards can have a couple dates on them, examples between them. One of the new features now in 22.1 is you can have some date ranges, and the dates now actually support, or the time now supports decimal format, not just 7:11. You could do 7.1254 and have an exact time as a decimal representation. That was kind of removed if you turn around and had your company setting for hundreds of minutes versus the decimal notation for time. And putting the filter so that I can put those 2 date ranges in there, I would say more people are looking to do this because they don't want to have all the data come back at them. They want to be able to put a range or put a starting at this time, not necessarily coming up to current, only for a certain date window. Nathan Schoonover turned around and submitted the end of last year syntax checking wherever possible. I know this was one of my complaints because later in the App Studio potholes, syntax checking is actually reversed for me. They're enforcing a syntax checking, but the syntax checking is actually false. It's returning a failed test, but when you run the application, it works totally fine and the code kicks off or the URL actually opens. But they're looking for a specific syntax, and that's not what I wanted the URL to be. I wanted to embed SSRS report parameters and telling SSRS what I want it to do with the report when I go view it. When I turn around and pass those, the syntax checker tells me it fails, but yeah, when I click the button, it works every time. But having the tooltips will help, but this is still not syntax checking. Now, they did add in some areas when you're typing in App Studio, I can do table dot notation, or I can put a command dot, and by hitting Control Space, I'll get the IntelliSense to pop up and tell me what are my options or what's out there. So that is a little bit of a way to help, trying to smooth some of the changes over while doing development in App Studio. Bob Naylor submitted our next request, and that was advanced search doesn't work for all tables. It's limited to certain tables for some reason. And they were looking at more like columns, or being able to say, I know in a BAQ, you can say add this to the search or add this to an advanced search, but that doesn't work for everything now. Through the use of the predictive search, we might be able to get there, but Bob was requesting this be added to the Application Studio so that people have access to it. Oops, let's go back here. Connor Chapman had one allowing the paste, insert, and update in more throughout Kinetic. Now, this is a #1 complaint. As you see, it has 26 votes on it. They are adding this more and more to the capability, but again, It's a difficulty with the tool set that was added and how they were adapted for it. The other thing is paste, insert, and update, yes, and moving out to Excel was the other difficult one. It's a server-side software. Excel is actually running on the client. So there are some hacks that have to be done to be able to run the software on the client and display the data when you export it. Being able to paste, insert, and paste update would also be nice, not just exporting. Many people are on Connor's wish here, but it did not show in the new in 22 features. But I'm going to say this is most likely a lot of people that are going to want this. Again, heading out to the ideas and adding yourself to the ticket. Right now, I would say there's was 3 pages, so maybe 30 App Studio issues. I'm sure there's a whole lot more, but I wasn't finding a lot of names that were out there filling out these requests. Now, just in the basic application studio itself, Hannah turned around and contacted me and shared with me, number one thing that she despises with it is the lack of documentation. A lot of it is tribal knowledge. What you learn, you keep in your head, you keep it going, or you end up reverse engineering something to figure out what they're doing. And the number one recommendation that Hannah had here for reverse engineering was using something like Edge or Chrome, and then viewing the source while you're running Epicor in the browser. This allows you to see more of what's going on in the background than anything else. And if people are not familiar with it, it's just opening up Epicor in a web browser and then pressing F12. Everything in Epicor 11.1 through 12.1 runs with the web browser. So you don't need to have Epicor web access or the web interface turned on. It's on by default now. This is one of the features with Kinetic, is it's browser-based as well. And we've been finding, I don't know about other people, but we've been finding the browser base actually runs faster than the smart client. Now, not everything's available, not everything's there, but for the items that are there, we're finding the browser-based access is actually faster for the end users. So this may be something you want to take a look at for your users and saying, hey, your order entry capability or your ability to enter an AP invoice, this works fine in the browser. Let's go ahead and use that there rather than using the old classic screen. But Hannah's complaint was there's a lack of documentation. And the syntax standardization, I thought it was just me, but there was not a suggested fix for this. And I think that's because we're not 100% sure yet where the problems truly exist. Again, this is a trial and error. Sometimes you have to use JSON syntax. Other times you have to use JavaScript. In other fields, it's this hybrid variant for App Studio that is the syntax you end up using. It's not proper JavaScript. If I run it through a JavaScript compiler, it's going to fail. But yet it works in App Studio. And there's no documentation yet to say which language is used when and where. So I know, like on a where filter for a BAQ, I can pass them as JSON, but there's a little bit of a hybrid in there because I can still say equals, but then in my parameter that I'm passing with the variable, I would do the word like colon and then pass the filter for the like for SQL, which shouldn't necessarily be working. If I try to compile it over in JSON or JavaScript, it's going to turn around error while it still actually runs when I turn around and run my application in App Studio. So finding out when and where, which language you need to use is going to be a trial and error for people. I'm sure Epicor will come out eventually and say, okay, when you're doing a condition, this is your language. When you're doing a object or a control and you're setting a property, you want to use this language. This type of documentation is heavily missing and is what Hannah and I am requesting from the software. Hannah had the same problem that I was also finding. Properties don't always save. When they don't, the workaround is to go change the property on another object, go back to the original object you were trying to update, make the change there, and she was saying 9 out of 10 times it sticks with the second time around. When trying to change a property like a description on something, it still wouldn't allow me to do that. Even if I put a description on a layer, I could go into another control or a property on one of the objects on the App Studio layer, make a change, hit save, no problem. I go back to the main form, try to change my description again, hit save. It comes back and it just says error. It doesn't say what the error is. So the other thing that I thought was kind of difficult with this is it doesn't really give you details enough to know what the error is. It just says fail. Hannah also turned around and let me know she would really like a JavaScript editor so that when you have to truly do code, you can. This doesn't exist right now, so it may be something that we want to create as a request for a fix or have the ability to do minor JavaScript code in there so that when you do truly need to do this, you can. She did share with me there's a current hack that she found on a condition widget where you can put JavaScript into the properties. So on the expression field, I can turn around and put minor JavaScript inside on a condition and still have it fire. So she did find a workaround to kind of be able to put some in there. I talked with Dylan before he went ill, and he gave me a couple of things that he's been running into issues with and creating your own screens. There was a suggestion out there, the UD entry menus don't really exist. Yeah, can I take a layer, remove everything off of it, and create a new layer on part entry, add my BAQs and my things? Yes, that is kind of a hack. But the underlying system connected to part is still going to be in the background. So this is not a real perfect way of doing this, but it is a possible way. And taking a simple screen that doesn't have a lot of info may be an area that you want to do with this so that you can get by this, moving it forward. Updatable dashboards don't convert over to Kinetic properly. So if you do write an updatable BAQ, put it onto a dashboard, that's not going to move over to Kinetic easily. Combo boxes he had mentioned need binding for them to work. The workaround is to tie them to a call context field like character 01. And then turn around and pass that into the binding, and then the combo boxes will populate. Oops, let me go back here. Dylan was also complaining about random error messages occur in the middle of editing. He was saying just save it, exit the designer, and reopen it. I ran into this myself where I would just get an error message sometimes. Other times I wouldn't get an error message. It would just keep spinning like it was trying to save. If it didn't come back within 2 to 3 minutes, I would just kill my Epicor session and go back in. So I'm back to the old 1986 save early, save often, be happy. So that is in one of my slides here for it. To use the Kinetic Layers, Dylan's saying you must create a separate menu item in menu maintenance. In 22.1, you can actually use the one that's out there now. So while it wasn't listed as a feature in the presentation or in the features list from Epicor, it actually is fixed in it. And the form to use option in menu maintenance is a toggle between classic menu and customization and base Kinetic. You can't use the Kinetic layer on a Kinetic app menu type. So if it is classic, you can't pick the Kinetic layer. You can only pick customizations that were made in classic. If it's a Kinetic app, you only see the different layers that were put in Kinetic. So this is kind of limiting, I would say, what you have access to pick there. And this, I would say, is probably a little safer. The Kinetic App Studio is not as user-friendly as Classic. Amen. I agree that 100%. But I've been developing Kinetic since version 8, or in Classic since version 8. So I've got a little bit more experience and might be a little biased to it. The same thing, I was a progress programmer before everything went .NET. So it's a case of learning how to get to this. It is a new world, and you need to forgive yourself and just take time to move it forward. He's got a note here, the text box and the combo box are two different types of controls. This is true. In Kinetic, some of the controls don't often work as you would expect them. Or when you add a control, the list of all the attributes for that controller, what you can do with it, are not always readily available. I haven't found like a Kinetic application controls map of, hey, I'm adding a combo box, here's things I can set. Here are the events that I have available for a combo box. Kind of like people had mapped out in the Classic world. I'm sure someone will come out with this here shortly. Hasso, you up for the challenge? But hey, I know Hasso likes to work with the framework and figure out what's going on.
I'm already working on it right now.
Okay. I figured, I'm like, somebody's going to come out with this map of knowing what are the different controls and attributes of the different options that are available inside Studio. Another one here in Application Studio, some of the known potholes. What I was saying is I put a URL and I turned around and I said, open up SSRS, run this report, render it as a PDF, display the PDF. The code works fine in a web browser. So any web browser, I type that URL in, I get the PDF of my SSRS report. I added a button, I put an on click, I gave it the URL, I put that in the parameter for the URL. It gives me an error every time it tries to compile. When I go into Application Studio, run my layer, it works fine. Opens up my web browser, executes the URL, pops up the PDF, and displays it. So inside Studio, I get an error every time that the code has a mistake in it, but it runs and everything works fine. So that syntax checking is enforced on my on-click event, but it's looking for a different syntax, not what I'm actually calling. Another one I found, if I preview multiple times, because as you're developing and learning, you're going to preview, did it show up right? Did I get it to lay out correctly? Then you're going to go back and massage your layer, make some changes, add the attributes, modify the properties on the controls. Then you're going to go preview again. Then you're going to make some changes. You're going to preview. As you're building these large solutions, you're going to be looking at this multiple times. Epicor gives you this lovely error. Business layer exception, undefined, error detail, nothing. And that's after a couple minutes of just watching the slide bar just scrolling over the top like it's trying to load but doesn't do anything. Then when you do, if you get an error, you can click OK to the pop-outs panel. Then you get this dialog pop-up that says fail to retrieve the required user and company info, which is like you lost your session. But it sends you back to the Application Studio as if nothing ever happened. Try and make changes, you're not in Application Studio anymore. So safest thing is just to close all the way out of Epicor and log back in. So I've gotten into the habit, before I preview, I hit the save button, which is not always the safest way to do it, but kind of make track records of what did I change so I can undo it. But if you turn around and go into preview and it crashes, you lose all of your work that you put in there. So back to the old days, save off and keep yourself happy. Excuse me. Like Jose, I got the 2 drinks, but I had to grab a Coke for this one. Next one is our last section for today, and then we'll get into any questions people have. If you need to save an unfinished function, these are going to be tips for building functions, which are functions that you call from Application Studio layer. You can use these in other areas, but functions is generally where you're going to take your C# customization code, put them into a function, then call them from the UI to have that code fire off. Nice thing, functions can be reused. So I can create a function that recalculates the order, kind of like Jose was doing with his BPM. He was saying, I'm going to probably move this into a function, because then that same code that does the calculation for a sales order could do the calculation for a purchase order and follow the same logic, just change over. If you are not done making a function and you're still testing it, just mark it as disabled. Disabled functions are not compiled by the system, so you're not going to get yelled at. Your code doesn't work. This isn't usable. You can't save it. As we've seen in past versions with Classic, you couldn't save it if your BPM or your execute custom code didn't compile. You couldn't turn around and save it because it would yell an error at you. So you would go in, comment everything out, then hit save, continue moving. Now, at least in functions, you just mark it as disabled, and that's going to stop the system from trying to compile it and enforce that everything works while you're in development mode. Function code editor, just like Application Studio, supports this intelligent coding. So control and space after typing a period pulls up all the options for, hey, my IntelliSense. So this is a kind of a nice thing, and I'm going to say Jose or Hasso had built an IntelliSense for one of the earlier versions. I'm going to say in Classic. Somebody had done that, I thought, because it was sorely missing for people in like version 9. Now this is part of the software. So our IntelliSense is in there. We just need to use the control space and space after hitting the period. Next one is our function query data access is limited to the table specified in the function library reference. So if I don't add this as a reference to the function library, I can't get to it. Be careful on how much you go ahead and add. You can overload and, hey, I'll just put every table in here, then I have access to everything. That's not the right option either. Make sure you are pulling what you need, but you do have to add them to the function library if you're going to make calls to those tables inside your function. Our next one here is going to be usage of function level variables is private. It is only to the function where you're defining them. You can't pass one variable from a function to another function. I'm sure Hasso or Jose will find a way that we can do that or change the scope of the variables, but right now, that's not out there. So everything has to go into that one function if it's going to be a variable that's used within there. Another one, requires transaction as an option that you can use in functions for involve updating the database. So if I don't have a data transaction at hand, you can't turn around and update the database because you really don't have a transaction record that you're updating. This will prevent data corruption or people trying to update, because you could do that, I guess, if you want to use the business objects or the REST call. But by default, you have to have a transaction here in your function for it to turn around and run updates back to the system. And another fun one, the final one that makes functions available for people is under the user security. There's a new security group called Functions Power Developers and Function Developers. And these are security groups that the user has to be a part of if they're going to be doing function designing. If they're going to be using the functions, that's fine. That's just a regular user, not a problem. But if you're going to be a developer, you have to add the security group to the user security level. I believe if you are a system security manager, you get that by default. But I'm going to say some companies don't give everyone full system security manager access. In that event, you're going to need to turn around and add them to these two security groups that are now in the system. If they have that attached to the user, they can go ahead and do the design in the function designer. It's not a checkbox. This is on the security groups, and you have to add them to that group. So this is a little bit different than other security models that Epicor's always enforced. It's always been a checkbox, or you have to give them menu access to something, or you go in and you say, this person is a advanced BPM developer. That doesn't exist anymore on the user options tab. You actually have to go to the security group and add them there. This is a little bit different than what we've seen in the past for how to grant somebody access to be a developer. That covers all of the function tips that I had. Here I thought I had a dozen, it's actually only 6 of them. But these are the highest ones that I kind of thought were important for everybody. The last one is the one that you're not even going to get in there if you don't grant yourself access to it. And I know I'm all of 3 minutes early, but open questions for anybody.
Yes, Yusuf has his hand raised. Yusuf, I'm going to try and unmute you. You ever have one of those days where you can't find how to unmute? What the heck?
I got it.
Thank you.
When she told me the person, I'm like, how do you go find him in the attendee list?
All right. Everyone can hear me?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So as I was going through your slides where like you mentioned a lot of new features about Kinetic. Now my question, like, okay, I see a lot of, okay, there is still, I don't see Kinetic as matured, right? And yeah, and like we also are planning to upgrade to Kinetic, and I'm hearing a lot that it is better, okay, you upgrade it to Kinetic, but then use the standard forms, Windows form, instead of upgrading to Kinetic. Is that correct?
Yes, I'll actually have a lot of clients that use both. So the forms that are in Kinetic where they didn't have a customization or anything major change there,
yep.
When they go live on 11 or 12, they'll roll out those forms as Kinetic, and they'll roll out the forms that had major customization still as Classic. Now, those major forms that rolled out as Classic aren't really going to work on the web interface. Only the Kinetic forms are going to work from the web access area.
All right. But then like we have a lot of like heavy customization done on the standard forms. That's in Epicor 10.
Okay. Now, when you say heavy customization, are you meaning adding fields, or are you putting a lot of code logic behind the screen?
Lot of actually, we have kindly re-engineered the whole process. We have a lot of new fields. We have a lot of code on the forms, and even we have a lot of big BPMs written the logics.
Okay. So moving the code over, excuse me, I'm going to say that would go over towards a function,
okay.
The customization code layer. Now adding the fields, that I would say you can definitely do in App Studio, and binding them to their custom fields or whatever, that works totally fine in App Studio now.
But then do you advise that should we wait to upgrade to Kinetic, or should we start, because we are planning to start the upgrade like in a month or 2?
Totally fine to start. You can go to the Epicor 11 or 12 version and only turn on the pieces that you want to use. So maybe we go with Kinetic reports first and get people accustomed to using it. We roll out the Kinetic screens for setup or main area, where people are setting up customers, ship vias, the base tables. That works totally fine in Kinetic. Roll those out. You may not have major customizations there. But when it comes to order entry, quote entry, those we can stay on Classic until we get those migrated over. Jose, I believe this is what you guys are doing also down there? Or are you looking to get everything to Kinetic and do one big, oh, he's not on the list anymore.
Yeah, Jose's slowly converting things over too.
Okay.
That's our path as well. We are going to take at the UFPI hybrid.
All right.
And that's
But
what
I
we're
would
doing
still
too.
suggest you upgrade to Kinetic, like just the base version. So which makes when you put in a support call, first question to ask you, what version are you on? You say 10.1. They're like, well, that's your problem.
Okay.
But if you're running 11 or 12, they'll take the call and support you. They are still supporting the classic screens on telephone support. They're preferring
Correct.
people go to the Kinetic, but you don't have to adopt the Kinetic screen. You adopt those as you get them converted and tested.
All right. Okay. But in that case, we have very few set of forms which we can use as a standard forms. But I think so that most of the transaction forms, that we can still keep it as a standard, and then we can slowly move on to the Kinetic forms.
Correct.
Yeah,
That's
we're currently doing
good
that
point.
right now. Just to let you know, we're currently doing that. We're moving up to version 11, and what we're doing, we have it on a separate server. And what we're doing, you have to recompile everything, but you can have everything in Classic. And then as you move it over to Kinetic, you can test and change your function or change your code into functions, things that you need to do for that. But you can do it piece by piece. It wouldn't stop you from going up to version 11. So you can actually do that. And then you can test all of your, and that's what our team is doing right now at our company. We're testing everything out. We have a whole list of everything that's customized, and we're going in and we're testing each and every individual piece to see if it will work in 11 in Classic View. And if it doesn't work in Classic, then we're fixing and repairing whatever we need to do. And then our next phase is start moving things to Kinetic or the Kinetic View. But it's not stopping us from at least moving up to version 11, which will then put us on the higher level support as well.
Yep. The other thing I would recommend is when you look at, okay, we need to upgrade these 10 forms to Kinetic, look at the users that are going to be utilizing those, and your more special users that they don't always adapt to new technology. They don't like change very well. Those, I would say, don't put them in the Kinetic on day one. Take your stars that are good at exploring or trying to develop their own workarounds, move them to Kinetic and let them be the wave that rolls out to your end users.
I think so. That's the right approach.
But that should work, and at our next user group meeting, Yusuf will let you go ahead and let us know how you did.
Sure. Thank you very much. Yeah, sure.
Okay, Calvin, you got two other questions over there.
Yeah, the one from Pierre I don't understand. So Pierre, if you can let me know what's going on here.
Let me see if I can find them.
And John Myers had a question, is there a good source of documentation? Hell no, that's what we're asking for. Examples of Kinetic customizations. John, I'm going to say the best answers right now, there is a little bit of help inside Epicor to at least get your feet wet and do things. The second best set of help is going to be the Epi users. God help. That website has so much information already out there that people are sharing and collaborating and discussing about App Studio and programming in Kinetic. There are some great examples out there and solutions that people have put out. This is how I did it. Here were the steps. Incidentally, that's where I found Hannah and said, hey, can you share some of your ideas? She's an awesome poster out there and puts a lot of examples and step-by-step instructions to help you learn how to use this.
And Pierre, I've unmuted you if you want to unmute yourself and get Calvin some more info.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Okay, hey, it's my first time talking. Yes, well, it's a small thing, but I cannot find a valid way to do this. I have multiple users, which a few of them left the company, so it's still in Epicor because of legacy issue in the tables. But they do show in a drop-down list of users when we want to choose from. How do I disable the inactive equal false only to be showing in the drop-down?
Not a problem. What you're going to want to do, Pierre, this would be more of the stump the chunk section, but I'll go ahead and answer it since you're on the phone right now.
Because I thought this was the stump the chump, sorry.
The stump the chump will be, oh, sorry, I copied the slide deck from the wrong one. Okay, yes. I just realized, I'm like, where'd you see stump the chump? I'm like, oh, okay, it's on my questions and answer page. Oops, copied the wrong one.
But we can put that on the stump the chump, no problem.
Super simple is you're going to do a method directive on that business object. And on the get list method, you're just going to add your filter to only be the active users.
Okay. Because I tried that. Also, what's the little difference between get list and get rows?
Get list pulls back the list for drop-down boxes. Get rows pulls back more info.
All right. So I did try that and it wasn't working. So at the stump the chump, if you want to just show quickly how, that'll be great.
Fred, do you have that one added, or can you email me since you already pulled it out of the questions?
You just need Pierre's questions in there?
Mm-hmm. Or just email it over to me and I'll paste it into the document.
Okay. I will do that. And then you've got one more from Andrew Spack. Do you want to try and take it? You've got 2 minutes before your next session.
Yep, not a problem. Is there a way to set focus on a field in Kinetic? And the auto start would be the first one. Setting the tab order would be the other. And I believe in personalization, you can also turn around and set it, but that's in personalization, not through App Studio. So I think those would be the 3 best ways to do that. As far as doing it after an event, yes, you can do that because I can set an event code and then I can say what action I want to take and go ahead and set focus, I believe, to the field there. That would be after putting a condition out there.